Hi, and welcome to today's conversation with WISC fellow Jessica Mehta. I'm excited to be here with her today. She was a fellow with us here at WISC a couple of years ago, working on a book of poems. So Jessica, welcome. Could you introduce us and tell us a little bit about what you worked on while you were at WISC?
Sure. So I am an interdisciplinary artist, poet, performance artist, and I work at the intersection of traditional and digital media. As a citizen of the Cherokee Nation, a lot of my work focuses on space, place, and identity in post-colonial America, and often addresses the many disparities faced by Indigenous people today. Many of my projects also directly address issues that impact me personally, like mass incarceration, eating disorders, homelessness, alcoholism, and the opioid epidemic. One example of this hyper-personal implementation was what I was doing when I was at WISC, and that was the creation of a book of poetry that was ultimately published by the operating system in Brooklyn, New York. That book has gone on to partially feed an anthology of what's going to be selected poems from 2000 to 2020, which received the MehtaFor Prize by Meadowlark Books this year. So that's releasing in January.
Wonderful. So I want to talk a little bit about that project and a couple of the things that you just said. Your work really tackles so many things through confession, through narrative, through storytelling, and offers a perspective that we may not be used to seeing. Can you talk a little bit about your work from a social justice standpoint? You made an anthology of incarcerated Indigenous women. All of your work seems to really have a social justice angle, and I want you to talk about how that process works for you.
I feel like it's kind of an organic, inherent process. I am the only person in my family to never be incarcerated. So like a lot of writers, especially poets, I write what I know or what my family knew. And for a long time, I wrote for myself, which is why I didn't start publishing until I was in my 30s. And also for a long time, I thought or felt like my experiences were relatively unique, even if they weren't, unfortunately, unique within Indigenous populations. But ultimately, you know, I know Indigenous audiences are the natural fit for my work, but I also know that those who might benefit the most are not Native. So although I consider myself an artist and writer first, I hope to also serve as a source to help encourage knowledge sharing, opening discourse, and information exchange beyond Indigenous communities. I'm always working to make poetry, art, and technology as accessible and engaging as possible. And with poetry, unfortunately, it's often seen as the literature genre that's dry or inaccessible or elite or boring, you know, and even though this obviously isn't true, it's kind of hard to get past the idea that, you know, a lot of us were first exposed to Shakespeare when we were 14 in high school, and that's probably not going to resonate with many people, and that's what we, you know, come into adulthood thinking that's what poetry is. So my goal is to introduce poetry to audiences in different formats to create a welcoming opportunity to experience the genre. And my work does generally have social justice angles because that's just the nature of who I am as a writer and in turn what I create. But I found that regardless, the overarching human themes are something that resonates with just about everyone. So blending that with what I've been working with in recent years, which is experimenting with different ways of presenting poetry for consumption that's off the page a lot of the time, I think has really done a pretty good job of starting that kind of commingled journey that I'm hoping to be a part of and direct in some sense.
Yeah, and it takes poetry out into the world.
Yeah, where it should be, where it is anyway.
Yeah. How has COVID impacted your work and studies? You said you weren't traveling as much, and I've always known you to be a big traveler and world explorer.
It has actually been good. I know I told you personally that almost immediately before COVID, I was doing a residency fellowship at Halcyon Arts Lab in Washington, D.C. And that's when I was really curating an anthology by incarcerated Indigenous women. So not only was I living there, I was also traveling to do these workshops. And on many levels, it's very exhausting work, you know, and then put travel on top of it, it's further exhausting. So now I'm enjoying the quarantine. I'm an introvert anyway, and it's just giving me time to pause and reflect and kind of work on projects that weren't getting as much attention.
You have written like a ton of books. You are so prolific. You have your own business. You write. I know that you do a lot of yoga. How do you do everything? Are you really scheduled? How do you maintain all of your interests?
No.
No.
I'm not really scheduled, but I am really, I don't know,
driven,
ambitious. Yeah, driven. I'm very type A. And I absolutely hate wasting time, which that made travel a little bit difficult for me, but I was fortunate to be in the position where when I was traveling a lot in the past couple of years, I was also doing a lot of the reading for my dissertation. So, you know, planes are a good place to do that. Always am looking for ways to carve away the time that's been wasted. And it's, you know, somewhat easy to do when we were in lockdown. Obviously, I haven't been able to go to my actual gym since March, so I created a home gym here, and I appreciate the fact that, you know, I don't even have to commute there and have gone back to running outdoors and just little things like that. So while I'm not scheduled in terms of I need to be doing this at this time every day, there are basically benchmarks or achievements that I do feel like I need to achieve every day, like, you know, hour of yoga every day and this much meditation. And I think it helps because I haven't had a traditional job in many, many years to give me a sense of that's a task that's been done for today, while at the same time giving me the liberty to be able to choose when that takes place in the day.
Well, and to have time for your creative pursuits and reading. I know you have to read a lot. Yeah. Can you tell us about some women artists or poets or other women who inspire you and your work?
The very first poet that I ever heard read in person was Adenizio, and she's based in Oakland, California. I was an undergrad, so this was around 2000 at Portland State here in Oregon, and we got extra credit if we went to go, you know, see a reading, and that's why I went. I was taking a poetry course anyway because I've always been drawn to it, but at the time I had no idea that it could actually be a central facet of my life. And seeing her read, I think really was a huge push towards taking poetry more seriously and exploring what was out there beyond, you know, what we're generally exposed to as kids. And I'm still hoping to go to one of her workshops one day. She hosts them every year, but it's, you know, every Saturday in Oakland, and trying to figure out that kind of travel. So maybe that will be my next big travel adventure. And also, I think I would say my favorite female writer of all time is definitely Toni Morrison. It's just absolutely amazing what she does with language. Maya Angelou as well. And in terms of other types of art, I'm giving very kind of like answers that like everyone's gonna know, but I guess everyone knows them because they're great.
Because they're great, yeah.
I'm like, well, but yeah, Frida Kahlo. I actually got to see an exhibition the last time I was in New York, which, when was that? I think it was the autumn. It was sometime in the past year, but everything's blending together now. I actually just yesterday looked up a tutorial. I'm like, how do you do hair like Frida Kahlo? So they kind of integrate different parts of my life.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm sorry, I'm going to add one more. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I would add one more female artist. Is actually, her name is Lanice, and she's the maker of these earrings, and she's an indigenous beader based in Montana. I just achieved collector status. So I'm looking for different ways to kind of integrate different tribal arts beyond the Cherokee Nation into every part of my life. And, you know, fashion and jewelry as a means of art has become more important in the past year.
That's wonderful. And you got them on a trip to Montana?
No, she's just based there. Actually, I have been to Montana, and she's nowhere near where I was. I was at the Flathead Reservation for a residency.
Yeah, yeah. I want to ask you to read a poem or two for us, if you're willing.
Sure. I actually will read two because
Yay!
I'm so often told my stuff is so depressing. And so I'm going to read one that, okay, maybe it falls into that category, and then one that is not. It's called Bad Indian, and it's also the title of a book of poetry that was just released by Brick Mantle Books in April. And I normally don't give any kind of precursors to my work, but I will in this case. So Kamama is the Cherokee word for elephant. And just an FYI, I wrote this well before Elizabeth Warren ran for the Democratic Party. I just want to put that out there. This was before. Bad Indian, not a speaker. Who gives a damn if they beat it out of my father in residential boarding school? They say pretendian, and an old man with creamed blue eyes cackled after demanding my ancestry. Everyone's a Cherokee. I apologize. For green eyes, pale skin. It's not enough to soften the cries. Wanabe clan. Elizabeth Warren all over again. Once an elder vet spit on my wanting cheekbones, my braids that I didn't know Lakota. I did not choose my skin or the trauma curdling rancid through my blood. We are born into creation disasters, settled war zones, armed with chanced defenses, so forgive me that ivory is my weapon. Poachers try and they show teeth, dressed in polyester and crafted altruism, but I am fast and I remember. I'm Kamama. You really think you got us all? We still roam our land. 13,000 years is a single heartbeat in the whole story. I am telling you, listen. I am hungry, matriarch made too young. My grief's too big to contain, and like Domini, I will starve 24 days to die from broken chambers, and by God, how you will keen, spill cracked bone to your knees, pay homage to my skeleton, to this bad Indian. I'd also like to, I'll share that Domini was an elephant who was bred into captivity in a zoo, and she was with her partner bonded for over 20 years. And when her partner died, she starved herself and died 24 days later. I wrote quite a series of poems after my mother died just over 2 years ago, and they ended up kind of moving into my book Savagery, which was released by Airlie Press in 2019. This is Bodies of Water. We are made of the ocean, spiked with salt and crackling bones half gone to sand. Within us is the whole wide sea, swimming fish and fragile reefs. Sirens aren't made up, they tuck and knot between our ribs, call us to our depths with songs that ring of memories, and we tell children, never turn your back to the waves, not for the unknown, surprise tsunamis and creeper currents, but for all the knowing stored like sunken chests within our marrow. What goes challenger deep rises again. In every particle of our everything, the calcium that builds our skeleton, we remember the brine that came before and all the leagues of which we'll go.
Thank you. That was beautiful.